Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down one of, in my opinion, the top events on the PGA Tour schedule, the 2025 RBC Canadian Open. Here on this episode, we're going to break down what makes this event one of the best. We're going to take a look at the brand new host course for this year, which I have got some takes on. And then we're going to take a look at the stats and at the betting board and at the DFS salaries and see if we can give you guys some winning picks and winning strategies for betting DFS and one and done here this week. Like I said, this is an event that I'm really looking forward to. I think that this year in and year out ends up being one of the better events on the schedule. It's certainly one of the better non-signature events of the schedule. We've been over on the podcast before how I'm not a fan of the signature event format. So anytime you get one of these like top tier non-signature events, I'm always here for it. Like you got a full field and it's a good field. And I think that that is something that's worth noting, worth watching. And I think that it's going to be a good one here this week. In fact, just off the top of my head, I think if you were to look at the non-signature events, I think that the best ones year in and year out, you end up getting good field at Phoenix, you end up getting a good field here, and then after that, it's probably like the Charles Schwab Challenge and Valspar that end up being two of the better ones, unless I'm missing one. But this one definitely ends up being one of the better ones. I would argue that Rory McIlroy actually saved this event, and we're going to detail that. But we're going to do our whole breakdown. Our trademark here is we're going to do it all in 30 minutes or less, and the clock is already ticking. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. But first, if you have not subscribed to the channel, make sure you go ahead and do that because we are going to be with you for the rest of the PGA Tour season, as well as throughout the rest of the summer. We're going to have all of our preseason best ball, college football, and NFL content, and then we're going to roll right into the regular season for that as well. And if you're subscribed to the channel, you will know when it all drops. We are closing in on 1,000 subscribers, so please help me out and help me get to that 1,000. It's a huge milestone. I'm going to be super proud when we get there, but I can only get there with your help. All right. Anyway, enough for me asking for help. Let's go ahead and dive into TPC. All right. So first off, I will say I do think that calling this course TPC Toronto is a bit of a misnomer. This course is actually not near Toronto. It's called technically TPC Toronto at Osprey Valley. It's like over an hour away from downtown Toronto. So I really don't think you can be calling this TPC Toronto. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. It would be like me calling where I'm from TPC Charlotte, and like I'm much closer to Greensboro than Charlotte, and much closer to Winston-Salem than Charlotte. Like it just would not be a good look, right? So anyway, TPC Toronto is the brand new host course, basically because what ended up happening is the RBC Canadian Open, since it has moved on the schedule, has been going to this rotation of courses in Toronto. They're like these classical city country clubs. And what happens is a lot of the memberships at those courses don't want the tournament back because they're paying a lot of money to be members, and the weather in Canada only allows them to play certain months a year. They don't want their course to be closed for a month or two to accommodate the tournament. And so what ends up happening is, and this happened with a lot of PGA Tour events, is the PGA Tour owns a bit of any TPC course. And so it's very easy for the PGA Tour to just come in and say, hey, we're going to play at this TPC course because we own it and you have to do what we say. And so that's why they're going to be here at TPC Toronto this week. It is a big departure from Oakdale and St. George's and Hamilton that have hosted, the last three editions, which have all been great, classical, really enjoyable venues. This one is very much not in the mold of those three. Now, like I said, I do think it can be argued that Rory McIlroy saved this tournament. Basically, the RBC Canadian Open before 2019 was placed right after the Open Championship. It drew like joke fields. No one wanted to travel that far after the Open. It was played at very mediocre golf courses, in my opinion. But then in 2019, they moved it on the schedule up to the week before the U.S. Open. Rory McIlroy came and played and won it at Hamilton. And that kind of was the signal of this event, like starting to become more significant. It became a lot of guys' final tune-up before the U.S. Open. You ended up getting some really good international players, international fields to show up here at this event with it being a national open. And it's just kind of kicked off just year after year of quality golf tournaments. Now, obviously, there was not a Canadian Open due to COVID in 2020 or 2021. But since then, 2022 won by Rory McIlroy, 2023 won by Nick Taylor in a playoff, and then 2024 won by Robert McIntyre. We've been gifted great golf tournaments. So let's hope that this year will be another one. And like I said, the field's pretty good. The course itself, TPC Toronto, is a par 70. It is about 7,400 yards. Y'all, that is a long par 70. But let's be honest, the main hazard here at this golf course is its length. there's not water in play a whole lot. The fairways are super wide. They're 37 yards wide. Like that's wide enough for pretty much everybody in the field to not have a difficult time hitting them. Now they are going to grow the rough out pretty thick. That is a trademark of the RBC Canadian Open venues. It's, kind of that last bit of prep for the US Open because that's what they're going to see next week. But these fairways are so wide, like that rough shouldn't be a hazard. The trees shouldn't be a hazard. Like the main hazard on this golf course is just length for length's sake. And that just generally does not produce a whole lot of like danger or a whole lot of like variance in scoring, right? Because with the fairways being so wide and the course being so long, that everybody's going to be swinging driver off the tee. And then what you're going to end up with is you're going to have a ton of long iron approaches into greens. There are 4 par 4s over 500 yards this week. That is not something you see every day. Like this is a truly long par 70. And with it being a par 70 too, I think that that's kind of artificial in my opinion. I can't stand when golf courses do this. There's so many places that they want to protect score to par, or, we don't want to look too easy. We don't want to look like a birdie fest. So we're just going to turn 2 par 5s into par 4s. And even though it's the same number of strokes at the end of the day, the score to par at the end of the weekend is going to be 8 shots less than whatever we perceive it to be. And I'm not a fan of that. And that's another thing that we have here this week is that 2 of the longest par 4s are par 5s for non-PGA Tour tournaments. So you're going to end up with a winning score that's probably slightly deflated from where it should be, but like still, it's not going to be a super difficult test. Like I said, it's not going to be very difficult off the tee, but you've also got very minimal hazards around the green. Like there's just not a whole lot of danger on the greens. The greens themselves are quite large. They're over 6,500 square feet. They do not feature a lot of slope or undulation. And so basically, it's not going to be very difficult to hit these greens, and it's not going to be very difficult to get up and down if you do miss these greens. So I think that this week is going to be all about long iron approach play. And if you're able to dial it in close with your long irons, then I think you're going to have a significant advantage over the rest of the field. Now, with that being said, that kind of comes into play like in terms of comp courses, right? I think the number one comp course I can think of is Valhalla, home of the 2024 PGA Championship. That was another course that was long for long's sake with wide fairways and minimal hazards other than thick rough. And it ended up playing quite easy, especially because it was rainy that week. But you look at that leaderboard, and it's a lot of guys that, I think would fit this golf course very well. And it's a lot of guys that are in the field this week also. You obviously had Xander Schauffele winning, followed by DeChambeau and Hovland. But Thomas Dietrich, Justin Rose, Shane Lowry, Robert McIntyre, all in the top 10. Rory McIlroy, Lee Hodges, Sahith Theegala, Alex Noren, Ryohei Satsune. Like all these guys played well, and all these guys are in the field here this week. Like they clearly had the winning recipe that week. And I think that that's going to be the case here again this week. I think that the recipe is going to be hit it as far as you can off the tee, finding the fairway, hopefully. But if not, you're going to have a long iron into the green. And the way you're really going to separate is with your long irons. Like looking at this leaderboard too, I don't even think it tells you enough one way about like putters. Like I don't think you need good putters at this event because with the greens being so benign, like bad putters aren't going to have as much to look at. And if they can just start the ball on line, then they're going to be in pretty good shape. Now, good putters obviously will have the ability to get hot, but like I think that this isn't necessarily a team no putt week or a team you have to separate with your putting week. I think this is a week where you're really going to have to separate with your long irons, which brings me into the key stats for this week. I think the number one key stat this week, as it is most weeks on the PGA Tour, is strokes gained on approach. I want to look at all proximity buckets north of 150 yards because of all of those long shots that you're going to have into greens this week, which, oh, by the way, if you thought that, it's just, with all the length on the par 4s, the par 3s have to be easy, right? Not really. There's one short par 3 that is designated as the rink hole, which is kind of like the Canadian version of the 16th hole with the Waste Management Open. That one is very short, but the other 3 par 3s are quite long, and the 2 par 5s are quite short for par 5s. So what that means is, with the par 5s being gettable in 2, all the par 3s being long, most of the par 4s being long, you're going to be having long irons pretty much every hole in. And your ability to separate with those long irons is going to be important. I also do want to look at total driving this week because I do think that you either want to be long or accurate, preferably both, off the tee, because I do think that it's going to be a heavy driver week. And if you can drive it out there a mile and that mile is in the fairway, you're going to be in really good shape. And then I also want to look at comp course performance. With this not being a good course history week, with this event not being super similar to all the other Canadian Open courses, I want to look at the ability to perform at other comp courses, which include my favorite one, Valhalla, but followed by that, a bunch of other courses that are just long for long's sake, like TPC Craig Ranch, TPC San Antonio, and Memorial Park. And then one that I think agronomically and visually kind of feels a little bit like this one, Detroit Golf Club. That's another very driver heavy, minimal hazard off the tee kind of course where you really have to go out and score. All right. So that is everything we know about the course. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to jump down the rabbit hole. All right, so if you've been with us for a while, you know that when I mention the rabbit hole, I'm not referring to an actual literal rabbit hole. I'm talking about the rabbit hole, which is from BetSperts Golf, that has all different kinds of data with filters and conditions in order to really isolate the exact type of condition and the exact micro skills that you want for a specific golfer on a specific week. And it allows you to make out a custom model for all those filters and conditions. It's really helped me out this year, and it's really helped me find some different guys that I might not have known otherwise. I highly recommend it. BetSperts Golf, the rabbit hole. All right. So now here's what we threw into the model this week, right? As we talked about, I think this is a very driver-heavy golf course. So I looked at strokes gained off the tee on driver-heavy courses. Top 5 in the field, we've got Alejandro Tosti, Luke Clanton, Rory McIlroy, Nicholas Norgard-Moller, and Rico Hoey. Then when you look at total driving for the calendar year 2025, the best in the field in that regard, Taylor Pendrith, Kevin Yu, Alex Smalley, Rico Hoey, and Isaiah Salinda. Another stat that I wanted to look at was ball speed. So this is indicative of guys who consistently drive it far no matter what the off the club tee is. And also ball speed, kind of indicative of good long iron players also. And what's weird is that we get a Danish trio at the top of this list for ball speed. We've got Nicholas Norgard-Moller, followed by the Højgaard twins, Nikolai and Rasmus. Fourth is Will Gordon, followed by Rory McIlroy. The remainder of that top 10 just kind of reaffirms my belief that this is a good stat to look at. Gary Woodland, Luke Clanton, Jesper Svensson, Wyndham Clark, and Joseph Bramlett. Next, I want to look at strokes gained approach. Last 30 rounds on all PGA Tour starts, we've got Shane Lowry, Henrik Norlander, Stephen Fisk, Emiliano Grillo, and Eric Cole as the top 5. Then in terms of the proximity buckets, I want to look at 150 to 200. Harrison Endicott, Johnny Kiefer, Matty Schmid, Antoine Rosner, and Charlie Hoffman as your top 5. Very eclectic group there. And then for 200 plus, we've got David Ford, Adam Schenk, Joseph Bramlett, Ludwig Oberg, and Kurt Kitayama. Then I wanted to look at what, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to look at approach is if you've got a long golf course, look at approaches on long golf courses, because that's going to tell you who's hitting their long irons well, because if you got a long golf course, you're going to have long irons. So best in the field in that regard. Henrik Norlander, Gary Woodland, Keith Mitchell, Corey Connors, and Doug Ghim. Then for putting, this course has a bent POA mixed grass on the greens. Look, I live in the southeastern United States. I'm not an expert on this type of agronomy. So I wanted to filter it a little bit, but I've also been told that it's quite similar to all bent grass. So in terms of just the bent POA mix, the best players in the field putting on that surface, Roger Sloan, Wyndham Clark, Harry Hall, Justin Lauer, and Mackenzie Hughes, with Sam Burns coming in number 6. And then when you just do bent grass, you end up with a slightly different list. Sam Burns, Harry Hall, Vincent Whaley, Matty Schmid, and Eric Van Rooyen. Now, this is when we start looking at all of the different kind of courses, right? So the first thing I wanted to look at was at par 70s. You know, how can you score compared to the rest of the field when you only have 2 par 5s to go after? And the best players in the field in par 70s, Rory McIlroy, Robert McIntyre, Tom Kim, Wyndham Clark, and Shane Lowry. Next, when you look at just long golf courses, who are the best players in the field? We've got Rory McIlroy, Ludwig Oberg, Alex Noren, Taylor Pendrith, and Sung Jae Im. Then, with Vincent Whaley also tied for 5, by the way. Then when you look at just par 4 scoring, who are the best players in the field? We've got Luke Clanton, Alex Smalley, Ricky Castillo, Lee Hodges, and Roger Sloan. Then a strokes gained total at TPC courses, because I do think that there's features of TPC courses that are all kind of cookie cutter, and this one does have some of them. The best players at those courses, Doug Ghim first, then Rory McIlroy, Wyndham Clark, Corey Connors, and Sung Jae Im. Then when you throw in all those comp courses, which is the list that we talked about on the previous slide, I also added in East Lake because it's a very long par 70, even though very few golfers have history there. I also threw in the other Canadian Open courses as well, which didn't add a super number of rounds, but I do think it's valid to look at Canada when you're in a Canadian Open. And so the best players in the field in that list of courses. Rory McIlroy, Alex Noren, Mackenzie Hughes, Justin Rose, and Corey Connors, with Shane Lowry coming in sixth. Throw all that into a custom model, and what you get, in my opinion, is no surprise. My number one golfer for the week is Rory McIlroy. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So I think that this is a great Rory McIlroy week. We mentioned already how he is the king of Canada, right? Like he really does play well at RBC Canadian Open courses ever since the tournament moved to this spot on the calendar in June. He has not finished outside the top 10. He's got a win, a ninth, and a fourth. Like he is the king of Canada, right? And Rory McIlroy, to me, is coming into this course significantly better than everybody else in the field. Like we've talked about all season long on the PGA Tour, how right now in golf, it's Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy. You can argue that Jon Rahm and Bryson DeChambeau are in that tier with them, but they're on LIV. And then a huge gap, and then everybody else. Well, guess what? There's no Scotty here. There's no LIV guys here. And what we've got we've now got a situation where Rory is by and large ahead of everybody else in the field. Now, if you were to try to nitpick Rory, let's take a look at his recent resume. So after winning the Masters, Rory has only played the Truist in the PGA Championship. At the Truist, he lost on approach. He lost around the green. Not great. And at the PGA, he lost on approach. Not great. That's typically not something that Rory McIlroy does. He generally never loses strokes on approach in back-to-back rounds, although he did do it at the Scottish Open and the Open Championship last year. But Rory McIlroy is such a prodigious driver of the golf ball and such a good putter when he has it going that he actually can usually offset these losses, or he can be such a good ball striker, which he was through the most part of the early of this year, that he can offset a bad putter. So Rory McIlroy has multiple pathways to victory. I think the fact that this is a long golf course, I think the fact that this is a par 70, I think the fact that this is a golf course where Rory knows he's got a major next week and he wants to get his game right, and he also wants to win because this is his tournament. I think that all of that plays into Rory McIlroy is significantly the best golfer in the field. He's significantly the most likely golfer to win this tournament. And I think that we have a situation not unlike what we have seen the last 2 weeks with Scotty Scheffler being the only alpha in the field. Now Rory McIlroy is the only alpha in the field, but he is not getting the same pricing that Scotty Scheffler got in DFS or on the odds boards, even though there is still that significant of a gap between Rory and the rest of the field. I will be playing Rory a ton in DFS this week. I will not be betting him to win because I don't believe in betting golfers to win at that short odds outright, but I do think that he by and large has the best chance to win this golf tournament, and I would be as afraid as I was of Scotty of Rory winning, because I think he's that by and away the best player in the field. Also, while I'm thinking about it, just because you play Rory in a DFS lineup on DraftKings or FanDuel and he wins, if he boat races the entire tournament, that doesn't instantly mean you win money. Last week at the Memorial, I had what I thought was going to be a very good week, and it did not pan out. I had a player pool of 22 golfers. 20 made the cut. Only JJ Spawn and Aaron Rye missed. You win some, you lose some, but still 20 out of 22 through the cuts. Pretty good. And I had Scotty Scheffler in about 70% of my lineups. And I made back about 80% of my entry fees. Like it's really hard to win if you don't get the winner right, like Scotty, and find the right sleepers. I didn't play Nick Taylor. I didn't play Ben Griffin. I didn't play Jordan Spieth. Like there's just some other guys near the top of the board that I didn't have that I would have needed to have in order to separate from the competition. So do not think this week that you can just plug and play Rory McIlroy and not worry about the rest of your lineup in DraftKings and FanDuel and think that everything's going to be okay. That's just not how it works. So the rest of my model top 10. Keith Mitchell coming in number 2. That's no surprise. Keith Mitchell is playing outstanding golf right now, especially in the ball striking categories. And he tends to play well at golf courses that Rory McIlroy plays well at. And I think this is a golf course that suits Rory McIlroy really well. I think this is going to be a great Keith Mitchell golf course. He's played this event each of the last 3 years, 2 top 10 finishes in Canada. Next, you have 2 Canadians, Corey Connors and Taylor Pendrith. I am going to very much opt for playing Taylor Pendrith over Corey Connors. Corey Connors is playing some great golf, but I worry that Corey Connors is going to be a chalky selection, whereas Taylor Pendrith, I think specifically, is a perfect course fit. He is coming in really driving the golf ball really well, and actually his approach form is quite good. It's still top 20 in this field. He's also quite good at long approaches, and he's also Been pretty good at all the comp courses, right? So I really think that this is a good spot for Taylor Pendrith. He's going to be my guy over Corey Connors. Fifth place in my motto is Gary Woodland. This is a name that I was not expecting to see near the top, but then when he showed up there, I was not super surprised, right? Because Gary Woodland, good putter on bent grass, good at very long golf courses, really good at easy conditions, which I do think we're going to see this week. And he's a guy that just generally strikes his long irons really well. And he's coming off of a performance at Colonial where he lost on approach, but he gained with the putter on bent grass greens. He gained off the tee at a driver heavy setup. I think this is a pretty good spot for him. And when it comes to my comp courses, he was T2 earlier in the season at the Houston Open at Memorial Park. So I really do think that this is a good spot for Gary Woodland, and I am going to be playing him with confidence in that 7K range on DraftKings. After that, Shane Lowry, number 6, and Robert McIntyre, number 7. Two guys I love this week. I will say I love McIntyre more than Lowry. I think McIntyre's skill set is a little more tailor-made for this course. McIntyre is a guy that is great with the driver off the tee. He is a guy that is a great long iron player, and he can get really hot with the putter, but it's been bad this year. That tells me that he's due for some regression. I'm going to continue playing Robert McIntyre a lot. Love him this week. I also love Lowry this week because of his skill with his irons. I think that that's his way to separate, and I think that his lack of skill with the putter should not, kind of deter him this week. 8th is Alex Smalley. I think he's going to be your chalk 6K play this week. He's a great driver of the golf ball, great approach player, really good at long irons, really good at all the comp courses. I think he's going to be your chalky DFS play in the 7K range this week. 9th, Alex Noren. 10th, Matty Schmid. For my model, outside the top 10, you've got a lot of 7K plays: Lee Hodges, Doug Gim, Joseph Blamrett, and Victor Perez. So interesting list this week. Now, I do tinker with this model all week long. If you would like to know my final top 10 of the model, as well as my core plays on DFS for both DraftKings and FanDuel, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. Every single week for every single PGA Tour tournament, I give you the core plays for both DraftKings and FanDuel, the model top 10, and a full write-up as to why all those players are where they are. So if you want access to that, head on over to Patreon. It's also how I finance a lot of this stuff on this show. So if you want to show me any kind of financial support, joining the Patreon is a way you can do that. Also, if you want more information from me, I am on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks, and I am in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description for that. It's a community of a bunch of people who play DFS for a ton of different sports. It's very DFS oriented, but there is a lot of good talk in the Golf DFS channel in there. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's take a look at the board, talk about some DFS plays, talk about some bets, and one and done, and then we're going to get out. So as I was mentioning with the custom model, I really don't think that Rory McIlroy is expensive enough in DFS this week, particularly on FanDuel. I think it is quite easy to play Rory McIlroy. Like, I did not find the strain on my lineups that I did just tinkering this morning that I did with when I tried to play Rory McIlroy than last week playing with Scotty. It's just a lot easier to play him, and I think that the gap between him and the field still exists. So I'm going to play a ton of Rory in DFS, and I really think that it's possible to play Rory in other like lineups with a 9K guy in it. I built a Rory and Robert McIntyre lineup that I actually felt pretty good about, honestly. So yeah, I do think that it is going to be possible to play Rory and another one of the 9K players, and I'm going to be playing a ton of Rory McIlroy in DFS this week. Now, if in my non-Rory lineups, because I never full lock anybody in golf, I just don't. It's something I don't believe in doing. There's always a WD risk or a miscut risk, so I just don't do it. Now, in my non-Rory lineups, the question of like the strategy comes up, right? Who do you play? Where do you go from there? Ludwig Oberg, great course fit, terrible recent form. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to play him at all. I think he is going to be a very good low-owned pivot play here this week at his salary of $10,500. I expect Corey Connors to be chalk. I'm going to be fading that chalk. As we mentioned, I do love Lowry, McIntyre, and Pendrith. I think my favorite is McIntyre, but a guy that I'm going to be playing a lot of in DFS, I really like Sam Burns this week. So this is a guy that has multiple pathways to victory because he is generally a pretty bad approach player, right? But last week, the Memorial gained on approach for the first time since February. And he's always been a good putter. And so this is a golf course where Sam Burns, prodigious driver of the golf ball, if he's able to really drive it out there and if he hits his irons well and he rides a hot putter, he could win this event. Like, I think he could win this event riding a hot putter without great approach plays, what Robert McIntyre did last year. So I do think that Sam Burns, I think he's a really good play. I think he's got multiple ways he can win this golf tournament. I also think that there is a prodigious drop-off after Sam Burns. So I think in my non-Rory lineups, I really want to try to get two of that group from Oberg to Burns before moving on down to somewhere else. Harry Hall's playing great golf. Like no disrespect to him, but I think when you look at his overall skill level and what he does, I think he's a step down from the rest of the guys here. Same with Keith Mitchell. Now, the guy that's really interesting. This is like, if you guys remember the Dos Equis commercials, the most interesting man in the world. Luke Clanton might have that title here this week. So this is a guy who's like 22. He's from Florida State, I believe. He's played in PGA Tour tournaments, but he is newly promoted to the PGA Tour, has his card by virtue of the PGA Tour U system. He's going to be on the PGA Tour for the rest of the season. Get used to seeing this name. And he's been a pretty good PGA Tour player in the time that he's played in PGA Tour events. Like starting last year at the US Open, he made the cut, followed it up with 2 top 10s at the Rocket Mortgage and the John Deere Rocket Mortgage, one of my comp courses, and then had 2 top 5s at the Wyndham and the RSM. This is a guy who is a great driver of the golf ball, who can be hot or cold with the putter, and is a pretty good long iron player. And he's been killing it in the NCAA, like just killing it. I think that he's worth a look. I think that he's vastly overpriced based off of his overall resume, but like in terms of the hype, in terms of the talent, like, man, if you want to be early on Luke Clanton, this is your chance to do it this week, because I don't know, he could very well be considered one of the 10 best players in the world a year from now, much like what happened with Ludwig when he was in this spot, when he played in this tournament 2 years ago when he got his PGA Tour card. Ludwig was on pretty much the same trajectory, just super decorated, talented golfer. Everybody knew he had the goods, and now he's one of the top 10 players in the world, and it took him 2 years. Luke Clanton could very well do that. And Luke Clanton's had more PGA Tour success so far than Ludwig did at this point in his career. Now, in the 8K range, so let me get this to you guys. In the RBC Canadian Open, everybody loves to play Canadians, right? Oh, it's their national open. Hey, let's go ahead and play the Canadians. They're going to be chalky. So if you want to fade the Canadians, like, go for it. Like, it's also your money though. So if you want to have fun playing Canadians in the Canadian Open, knock yourself out. But just generally speaking, the Canadians get a bump in ownership for their national Open. But honestly, I find the 8K range this week to be pretty bad. I think Alex Noren is a really good fit. I think that Chris Gotterup is a really good fit. But other than that, like, there's just not a whole lot to get excited about. And so I'm going to kind of skip that range and go down to the 7s. To me, there's a lot of guys in the 7 range that make building Rory McIlroy lineups really possible, right? You have Thomas Dietrich, Justin Rose, Ryo Hisatsune, all guys that played very well at that PGA Championship in or at Valhalla. And I don't think anybody's talking about any of them this week. Like, if you watch any other golf content, which I do, they're all having a very similar breakdown to the course that I did, which kind of makes me a little worried that we're going to get thrown a curveball. But none of them are really talking about Dietrich, Rose, and Ryo Hisatsune. And Hisatsune's playing some great golf, man. Dietrich's not, but Dietrich just fits the course so well. And Rose has played super well in Canada in his career. I like all 3 of them. But my favorite play in the 7K range, a guy that I've actually already bet on, and I'm not a guy who like runs to the sports books on Monday morning to make golf bets. I like to do all of my research after I see the field, after I see the odds, after I hear people talk about it. And so Ryan Fox was a guy that I went to the book to bet this morning. I think this is a really, really good spot for Ryan Fox. He was in contention here last year at Hamilton, almost won. This year, he's coming in with great approach form, getting over half a stroke on approach in each of his last 3 tournaments. He's a great driver of the golf ball. He is internationally traveled, won in all different kinds of courses, all different types of environments. Played very well at Houston, kind of faltered down the stretch on Sunday. Like, so he's got the comp courses. He's won on the PGA Tour this year at Myrtle Beach. I think this is a great spot for Ryan Fox, and he's a guy that's probably going to be a core play for me in DFS. He already is a bet to win the golf tournament. Aside from him, I do think Kevin Yu and Alex Smalley are pretty good spots. We already mentioned I think Smalley's going to be chalk. I think Matty Schmidt is going to be chalk. Sahith Theegala and Cameron Young, super talented. I would even put Tom Kim in this category as well. They're playing so badly, no one's going to play them. So I think you can get a little bit of a look there. If the only criteria for this week is long iron play, I think Doug Kim is very much worth a look. Ricky Castillo, very much worth a look for that reason. I think those 2 are pretty solid. I would also put Grillo in that conversation. Like, Emiliano Grillo is a guy that in his time on the PGA Tour career has been known for his approach play. Well, it was kind of cooling off until it wasn't. The last 3 events, he has gained over a stroke and a half per round on approach. That is staggering. And if he continues that, if he can just hold water with the rest of his game, he's going to be in great shape. Back-to-back top 20s for Grillo. I think this is a really good spot for him, and I'm going to be playing him in DFS at that salary of $7,100. After that, like the talent really drops off in this field. There's not a whole lot in the 7 or the 6K range to be excited about. I do think that Victor Perez and Stephen Fisk and Lee Hodges, even for that matter, 3 guys right at $7,000 even, that if you're all about approach play this week, those are 3 guys that are really good approach players, especially on longer golf courses. Victor Perez was 3rd here last year. I think that those 3 guys are all worth a look, in my opinion, in the 6K range. Man, like really to me, I think the strategy in the 6K range this week is like pick a young guy that you think is like up and coming, or an older guy that you think is like on the come up, right? And what I mean by that is Danny Walker at 6,900 is a young guy that I really like. I think he's a really good long iron player. It's kind of showed up in the events he's played so far. Was very bad at the Charles Schwab Challenge, but before that, he had been stringing together some really good finishes, right? Including a T6 at the Players. So I think he's the type of guy that has some upside that could play well here this week. I'm not like saying he's like this super sure thing, make the cut kind of guy, but I think he's worth a look. I think that Nick Hardy, it fits the bill for like a veteran that, might be on his way back up. I played Nick Hardy a lot on the fall swing last year, and he was really close to winning some tournaments. This year, though, it's been god awful. But, he had a T11 at the Charles Schwab Challenge. That's a difficult golf course that has a lot of long iron approaches. I think that's not a bad spot, like to compare. I think in it's par 70. So I think Nick Hardy's not in bad shape. After that, like, man, it gets ugly. It really does, y'all. I do think there's some young guys that you could go with. Aaron Wise is returning back from injury. He's definitely more talented than 6,500. John Pak, guy that played really well at Colonial, Charles Schwab Challenge, played golf at Texas, very decorated in college. He's now a full-time PGA Tour player. If you think that this is a spot for like one of these young guys to get going, I think he could be a young guy that could do it. I don't know. I kind of think he's the only dart throw that I would make. Gordon Sargent is down here. I don't remember what exactly his price tag was, but he's a guy that was in college, super talented. Everybody loved him, and then he kind of like lost it. And now he's a full-time PGA Tour member after not having a good college season. Kind of an interesting dynamic there. But yeah, lot going on. The 6K range, not super appetizing this week. All right, let's real quick talk about one and done. So last week, me saving Scotty Scheffler for one of my one and dones paid off because he ended up winning, right? And so now I'm right back in it. I went from being near the bottom, correctly used my Scotty Scheffler play. Now I'm actually barely outside the money. So if I can keep it going, I'm going to be all right there. Use Colin Morikawa in my other one at the Memorial, still just outside the money in this one. So I need to kind of figure out my strategy here. So my preliminary pick was Aaron Rai, which, not knowing much about the golf course, not knowing what the field was going to look like, I don't think that was a poor preliminary pick, but he ain't playing, so I got to find somebody else. So the strategy for one and done this week, with this not being a signature event, I'm not playing Rory. But keep in mind, there's not a whole lot of signature events and majors left. There's the U.S. Open and the Open. There is the Travelers Championship. And then there's the 2 FedEx Cup playoff events. And so if you know who you have left and you don't need to use Ludwig or Lowry or Connors maybe at one of those, then you can use them here this week. And I think that it's a great spot for all of them, right? I think Corey Connors is probably going to be the chalky one and done play. You can see in the league I'm in, a lot of people still have him left. And it's the Canadian Open, and he's playing good golf. Like, I think he's going to be the chalky one and done play this week, like big time. I do think that all the guys we talked about, I think Pendrith is really live. I think McIntyre is really live. I think Burns is really live. I think Keith Mitchell is really live. And I don't think that there's a spot that I'm really saving any of those guys for, except maybe McIntyre at the Scottish or McIntyre at the Open. Maybe Sungjae for one of the Bentgrass Birdie Fests in the summer. But yeah, I think Burns and Pendrith, I certainly can't think of anywhere I'd want to use them. So I think that is kind of where my strategy would go. And in this one that I'm in, knowing that I'm probably going to want McIntyre at the Scottish Open, and knowing that I'm just outside the money and a lot of people have used him already, I think I'm going to go with Sam Burns here. I think that's going to be my selection for the one that I've been picking here on the show. But all right, y'all, that is going to do it here for this episode. As we mentioned, 30 minutes or less. I think without the intro and the little mini promo, I think I did it, but might be a little over. But if not, it's okay. Like I said, this is a great golf tournament. I'm very much looking forward to it this week, and I hope my enthusiasm has showed up here in this video, and I hope that I was able to give you guys all the information you need to know about the course itself, about the field itself, and give you guys some winning picks and strategies for DFS betting and one and done. But y'all, that is going to do it here for this episode. We will be back next week. It's a major again. It's the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Should be super interesting. Real interesting. I've got some takes about the top of the field. I've got some takes about some guys in the middle of the field that I'm ready to fire off. Really looking forward to the U.S. Open episode. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be here with us for that. And if this video helps you out in any way, please hit the like button. That way, the like button helps me out so much on YouTube, helps more people find the channel. It helps it show up in searches. I used to think that content creators were just like pandering when they would ask for likes, but no, like it really matters. It really does help. So if this video helps you out, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. So that way you can help us get to our goal of 1,000. But that is going to do it here for this week, y'all. Like I said, my early bet this morning was getting in Ryan Fox to win this golf tournament. If you guys have a guy that you think is going to win, let me know in the comments. Let me hear it. But Ryan Fox is kind of my guy this week, my long shot bet, and I'm hoping that that's going to come through. But anyway, that's going to do it here for this week, y'all. Best of luck to you guys with your picks and plays at the RBC Canadian Open. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.